The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering bundled lesson packages including rental equipment and lift tickets. Online registration available at skisundown.com. Winter made better. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a birthday bash and a book about beginnings. Jane Yolen joins us along with the author of a new children's book about Jane Yolen's earliest work, Heidi E.Y. Stemple, who just so happens to also be Jane Yolen's daughter.
And a storytelling event at Bombix embracing the multitudes of the Two Quote Bags community, which is just another way to rearrange the letters in 2SL. LGBTQIA+.
Yes.
Much fun, more fun to say. A community with Reen Smith and Wilder Ayers who will give us more insight about the Queer Story Slam happening on Saturday.
But first, to Capitol Hill for a check-in.
Because the nation may be a little under the weather, and we don't just mean the snow from this morning.
Time once again for our weekly conversation with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Congressman Jim McGovern, in a segment we call McGoverning with McGovern. And not quite the onslaught of listener questions as we got last week when people were still getting used to whatever it was that Doge was going to be up to with Elon Musk, but still a hearty handful of questions from our listeners this week. So I guess we'll start there. Mike Lynch from Amherst says, in recent years, it's become increasingly common for people up for confirmation in the Senate to, as he says, lie outrageously, denying earlier statements or making promises that are discarded upon confirmation. And I'm imagining that with Tulsi Gabbard in front of the Senate, with RFK today, with Linda McMahon on the way as these cabinet positions will be voted on, he wants to know, is there any recourse if people lie outrageously, as he says, or deny statements that they made? Are they under oath? Are there any consequences if these folks say one thing on the Senate floor and then go and do something completely different when they're actually in those cabinet positions?
Well, some of them are under oath and some of them are not. And if you lie to the Senate, if they want to hold you accountable, it requires an action by the Senate. And one of the problems with Republican control of the Senate is that they seem unwilling to want to hold anybody accountable. I mean, we'll see about Kash Patel, who lied during his confirmation hearing to some of the senators, and we'll see whether or not there's bipartisan consensus that, you know, if you lie to us like that, you shouldn't be moved forward. But if they are confirmed, the recourse is the Senate has to act. And if the Senate doesn't act, then they get away with it. And it's a terrible precedent. And I've been astonished at how much Republican senators have been willing to tolerate and accept during these hearings, I guess just to please Donald Trump. But, I mean, I think history will not look kindly on their behavior. And again, these hearings have been like one round of 5-minute questions apiece. I don't know. It seems to me that there should be multiple rounds of questioning for everybody, especially for, you know, Attorney General or FBI director or the head of HHS. I mean, really, you know, just each senator gets 5 minutes and we're done. That seems a little bit ridiculous to me.
Can you think of a time when either Democrats or Republicans were in control where somebody was held accountable for something they said that was false while they were being confirmed?
Well, I mean, people have been impeached. I'm not sure whether it was for what they said, but I think there are cases when you go back where people didn't get confirmed. I think what Trump has done is he has lowered the standards in such a way that it's just become normal to lie. And he himself is a pathological liar. He lies so much it's no longer even noticeable. People just brush it off. But the standards have been lowered, and that's really not something we should welcome, especially when it comes to our government. We should want the best and the brightest, no matter what their politics may be, in these positions. And it's hard to believe that the people he's putting in these positions in his cabinet are the best and the brightest. It's just really, it's embarrassing, I think.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, another listener question from Nina in South Deerfield. She wants to know, could you please ask Representative McGovern to explain his vote on H.R. 27, a bill about the classification of fentanyl-like substances? A little bit from the bill, it reads that it permanently places fentanyl-related substances as a class into Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act. A Schedule 1 controlled substance is a drug substance or chemical that has a high potential for abuse and has no currently accepted medical value. It passed the House with Republican support. You voted no on H.R. 27, and Nina would like to know why.
Yeah, and if she writes me, I'll give her a more kind of detailed description. But we had a better bipartisan bill that had been negotiated that was, quite frankly, we all thought was, a better way to kind of address the fentanyl issue in this country. It was actually part of the spending package that we were going to vote on at the end of the year, but Musk blew that up, and this thing was dropped out of it. So this is just kind of a narrow piece of it. But it's also a little ironic that the Republicans are saying they want to get tough on fentanyl when one of the first actions of Donald Trump was to pardon a man who received a life sentence by a federal court for helping to bring in fentanyl into the United States in large quantities. Fentanyl is a huge problem in this country. Much of it comes in through legal ports, but the guy Trump pardoned was responsible, according to federal authorities, for bringing in, an unbelievable amount and getting into our streets and killing our people. But it's a long and complicated bill, but I'm happy to respond if you can get me her address or whatever with a much more detailed explanation.
I certainly will. I'll forward it to your office. But just as a follow-up question, for my edification, if this was part of the bipartisan bill and was dropped out of it, what was no longer bipartisan about it that made you want to vote no for it? Anything specific? Because
the other bill was more comprehensive. It had a lot more in it, and it had funding in it, and had stuff that would actually make a difference versus something that was a soundbite. So the other bill was a much better bill.
Another question, this one's mine. They're not all listener questions today, Congressman. Speaker Mike Johnson is sort of fighting his own party in the Freedom Caucus for the budget. Now, Republicans haven't managed to fund the government yet for 2025, but they're trying to pass, I believe, 12 appropriation bills before the March 14th deadline for another potential government shutdown. It looks like that there are some cuts to safety net programs like Medicare and SNAP. It also looks like there are potential cuts to Social Security. The White House looks like they're letting Johnson proceed on this one as opposed to being more in line with the Freedom Caucus, who Johnson is fighting in his own party. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, is saying that he's going to fight the GOP's budget reconciliation plan every step of the way, saying that it prioritizes massive tax cuts for their billionaire donors. Can you tell us what your take is on these potential 12 appropriation bills and whether they will keep the government running past the middle of next month?
So there's two issues you raised. One is the continuing resolution that keeps the government running to the end of the year, and the other is the reconciliation bill, which is going to be a larger bill in terms of its content. Look, I mean, I don't believe in government shutdowns. I want to keep the government open, but I can't vote for a bill or any bill that would gut programs that help my constituents. I came here to help people, not hurt people. So don't put something in a continuing resolution to cut people's SNAP benefits so people can't afford to put food on the table. Don't do something that's going to cut funding for education or for health care for senior citizens, or don't cut special education programs and Department of Education. I mean, the way this should work, and again, I've pointed this out before, the Republicans have the smallest majority in almost 100 years, and they control the House and the Senate and the White House. So they're in charge. They're responsible for governing. They're responsible for keeping the government open. And if they want our help, then they need to talk to us. And we have to have a give and take. But I don't think people expect me to vote for a bill that will hurt them, that will hurt our communities. I mean, I don't think that that's reasonable. And if that's the bill the Republicans want to do, they can pass it on their own. I mean, they run around telling everybody they have this great big mandate. Well, okay. Again, they lost seats in the midterms in the House. But if they think they have this great big mandate, then put your mandate pants on and pass whatever the hell you want to do.
Mandate pants are, by the way, what I'm going to wear on Valentine's Day because everybody needs.
But don't ask me to support a bill that guts programs that I have fought my entire life to support.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, there was a story in Politico this week. The headline: Highway robbery. New York City hits back over FEMA funds seized by the Trump administration. The $80 million in funding was clawed back after the Trump administration claimed that money was being used to house migrants in luxury hotels. Massachusetts is talking about this issue on Beacon Hill. There have been different continuing resolutions in a similar vein about trying to fund the shelter system here. This is money, FEMA money, that was appropriated by Congress, which is Congress's responsibility under the current reading of the Constitution. Are you fearful that Massachusetts could be next when it comes to a big cash grab, money that has often already been spent that has been allocated by the federal government through FEMA for programs like this?
Yeah, look, I'm worried not only about money from FEMA, but money from all federal agencies, quite frankly. I hope that that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that the administration will actually respect, the Constitution and understand that Congress appropriates money, and that the administration just can't unilaterally go in there and seize that money, especially money that's already been allocated. But this administration seems that they're willing to do anything, and I think we're waiting for them now to ignore court orders. I mean, that may be the next thing that they try to do. So I think we have to be prepared for anything.
You mentioned how you're fearful that the Trump administration may ignore court orders. There was a big piece on NPR actually earlier this week talking about how a lawyer doesn't believe we are in a constitutional crisis yet. That right now a judge will rule against something the Trump administration wants to do. The Trump administration will say, that's not how we read what we're doing. We don't believe it's not constitutional. They will appeal. That is the natural course of the way this usually works. But what people are fearful of is that one of these orders will be ignored, that they will proceed. And what would the recourse be then? As a sitting congressman, what would the recourse be then? What would happen if the Trump administration ignored it?
Yeah, well, if we were a functioning Congress, you would take action legislatively to hold the administration to account. And if the president were continuing to violate the law, then you would move to impeach him. We can't even get the Republicans to do a committee hearing, never mind do anything that might bother Trump. But I think the courts have, some people have said the courts don't have these enforcement mechanisms. But one of the things the courts can do is impose civil penalties on people that are carrying out these orders. And if they're doing so knowingly in violation of the law. And, civil penalties can't be pardoned. So Trump can't pardon civil penalties for people. So there's still some, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm told that there are some ways for the courts to increase the pressure on them. And I'm hoping that if the Trump administration is just blatantly violating judgments from federal courts, that people will make their views known. Part of what needs to happen here is that there needs to be pressure on the people who are in charge of Congress right now. I tell people all the time, they have the smallest majority in about 100 years. We need like 3 Republicans to join with us in order to stop something. And I get it. They're getting a lot of pressure from Trump, and Musk is threatening to fund opponents against them in primaries. But you know what? They should feel that there's a consequence if they vote for some of this stuff, or if they turn a blind eye. They should feel some pressure that their constituents will not vote for them again.
Meanwhile, Doge and Elon Musk is running through government programs, celebrating certain government programs being absolutely shut down, according to him, or posted with a little picture of an RIP gravestone. From what you have heard coming from Doge, have they found any legitimate waste and fraud and abuse? We are hearing from the Republican side, from Elon Musk's relentless posting on his platform on social media, that they are finding fraud and waste and abuse left and right. Are the Democrats agreeing with any of this fraud and waste and abuse that Doge has found so far? And if so, can you tell us where this fraud and waste and abuse might be?
Well, first of all, I've never met anybody, Democrat or Republican, who favors fraud, waste, and abuse. And if there's fraud and there's waste and there's abuse, wherever it may be, let's identify it and let's address it. But that's not what's really happening here. And some of the stuff that they're talking about, fact checkers are now saying that it's wrong. He made a big deal about USAID funding transgender comic books in Peru, or a transgender opera in Colombia. Washington Post says that's not true. Or $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. That's wrong as well. They take things and they take them out of context and they exaggerate them. But it's interesting, the stuff that they're identifying is like $10,000 here and $50,000 there. The bottom line is this. Let me just say this about USAID. And I said this during an agriculture committee hearing the other day. People somehow are fine on the Republican side with eliminating USAID, even though USAID literally feeds millions of people around the world. Helps prevent starvation, helps combat disease, but feeds people. I think that's a good thing, in terms of our approach to other countries. I think it engenders goodwill, and people like us. And when they like us, they don't want to blow us up. I think that's a better investment of our money than building more nuclear weapons, quite frankly. But that's me. But even if you don't think that, What I said in the Ag Committee the other day is that the food that they use to help feed people, at least $2 billion of that comes from local farms here in the United States. U.S. farmers grow and produce the products that are used to help combat hunger overseas. And I think farmers feel good about that because they know they're helping, make the world a better place. But they're also earning a living as a result of that. Now, you eliminate USAID, you take $2 billion off the table. Tell me, how do you make that up? How does rural America deal with that? And the answer is there's nothing that will fill in the void. And farmers will pay a price. And food prices will continue to go up. So I get it. They're into all these little sound bites and this and that. Understand, the stuff that he's targeting not only impacts things halfway around the world, it impacts things halfway down the block. Same thing with the Department of Education. You shut down the Department of Education. What happens to special ed programs? What happens to Pell Grants? Who administer these programs? Where do they go? And one of the troubling things about DOGE is that it's all done behind closed doors. This is not an open, transparent process. He's getting access to private information, your private information. Under what authority? What kind of clearances does he have? What kind of clearances, if any, do the people who work for him have? This is not about whether you support fraud, waste, and abuse or you want to eliminate it. No, we should eliminate it. And we have inspector generals and we have audits that we do regularly. And they do identify fraud, waste, and abuse. That's what they're for. But this is about shuttering agencies and departments that do good work. And why? To help put more money into funding tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. The Republicans just proposed their budget yesterday, and none of this, what they're doing is about balancing the budget, because in the budget, they asked for a $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. They want to increase debt. So, all this, we're saving you money. No, they're stealing money to put toward paying for tax cuts that will benefit people like Elon Musk and not regular people. And so I think people will come to appreciate, what he's doing as time goes on and as more information comes out. But he may end up doing some damage that we can't reverse. So it's important that people pay attention and that people speak out.
Another listener question from Denise, and I already know the answer to this one, and the opportunity is coming this weekend, but she asks, please ask Representative McGovern when he's planning to schedule some town hall gatherings to let us know what he's been doing and is planning to do to fight back, as she says, this Trump-Musk et al. Fiasco. You do have a town hall meeting coming up in the 413 this weekend. Can you tell us about that?
Right. So I've already done one. I did a town hall a couple of weeks ago in Phillipston, and I'm doing one on this Saturday at 9:30 a.m. at the First Churches in Northampton. We advertise it mostly in Northampton and a couple of the surrounding communities, but anybody's welcome to come. And I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that's happening here in Washington, some of my concerns, some of the things I think we need to do, and also talk about things that I hope that people who live in our communities will do as well. I'm also open to anybody's advice and suggestions on creative ways that we can fight back and, creative ways that we can get our message out better so that people, know what is happening and know that they're not powerless. So I would, anybody who wants to come is more than welcome. Again, it's at 9:30 this Saturday at First Churches, and I hope some people show up.
Last question. What's giving you hope this week, Congressman McGovern?
Well, I actually met with a group of students from Deerfield Academy who were down here in Washington, and I was really impressed with the give and take that we had. We did a little walking tour of the House floor, but then I came back. We had a good discussion, and again, it gives me hope for the future that there are young people out there who are not only curious but who are compassionate and who really want to be part of creating a better world. It was a great meeting, and I thank them for coming down.
And with the track record of Deerfield Academy, those are the future leaders of the world. So there you go.
Yeah.
Quite literally. U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern joins us every Thursday. If you've got a question for the congressman, you can send it to me at thefab413@nepm.org, and I'll ask it on your behalf. Or heck, just go to First Churches in Northampton this Saturday morning, and you could ask the congressman yourself. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best. Thanks.
Coming up, a daughter tells her mother's earliest story in a new children's book, and a party gets thrown to cap it all off as we welcome Jane Yolen and Heidi Stemple to the studios to talk about Janie Writes a Play.
But first, queer stories told truthfully on stage to bring us all together in these cold days. We'll hear about the second Queer Story Slam at Bombyx next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family-owned and operated complete exterior remodeling business offering windows, siding, gutters, and more. windowworldofwesternma.com.
Monty, great mug.
Thank you. Our engineer got this for me for Christmas because I was
Wow, it's
Barbie
beautiful.
for the Food Bank March.
Oh,
Not
nice.
last year, but the year before. And Ken, but different days.
Literally every day of my life, I'm Barbie.
Yeah.
They're both inside me.
One of our
me
stories
too.
is actually called Barbies.
It's called,
cool.
yeah, Sexy
Sexy
Barbies.
Barbies.
Woo.
Yeah.
Sexy Barbies.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there.
It's Barbie and it's Kim Petras.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Saturday night will be a night of honesty, vulnerability, community, and joy. After a sold-out debut, the Queer Story Slam returns with its second event, Love, Libido, Liberation, this Saturday night, February 15th, at Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence.
It's a celebration of queer love and erotic expression as storytellers share powerful stories exploring all expressions of love and desire, from pivotal experiences of self-love to searches of sensual aliveness to paradigm-shifting sexual expansiveness, because queer love and erotic expression are powerful and subversive celebrations of freedom.
And we are joined by two of the organizers of the Queer Story Slam, Maureen Smith and Wilder Ayers. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Hi, great to be here.
So good to be here.
Let's push the limits of sexuality on public radio.
Love it.
But this seems like a fun celebration. Happens to be Valentine's weekend, if that's your bag too. But where did the idea for this theme come for this Queer Story Slam, the second incarnation? Reen, you want that one?
Yeah. So we actually were really intentional about this theme given where we are right now politically. And we thought about including kind of erotic liberation as kind of a way to cultivate a space of sharing in community and joy and resilience, and the ways that we can collectively come together and celebrate each other and our stories in a time of a lot of instability and being kind of scary out there.
What was the theme of the first slam?
All the feelings.
All the feelings?
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. We had a beautiful evening of multi-generational storytelling, and it was just about a really divergent and emergent, wide range of experiences of queerness across different ages. So all the feelings felt like an all-embracing way of categorizing the stories from the first slam.
So this is becoming a series then. Yes.
Yes.
I get
Yes. We have a vision of letting this be a seed of inspiration for different communities across the nation to come together and amplify and celebrate and uplift intersectional queer community. So we have potential offspring happening, I think, in the eastern part of Massachusetts. And then this wonderful human is now living out in California, and maybe will be...
Taking it out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
So did you come back for this?
I did, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
In the snow.
Yep.
Wow, that's some dedication.
Yeah. Are you both storytelling, or who are the storytellers going to be this Saturday night?
Well, we can't disclose their personal information, but neither of us are storytelling. We are both organizers, and I will be emceeing. But we have an amazing cross-section of intersectional queer community from Western Mass specifically that will be storytelling across just a wide myriad of queer experiences, which is really exciting.
I understand why people might not want to disclose who they are that are speaking at this particular thing. You're screening these stories in advance. I saw on the website there's a place you can submit your story. What are some of the subjects that we'll be hearing about?
Yeah. So we have some amazingly sweet stories about first loves and what it is like to feel that spark at a young age, coming into queerness and how people found their way to queerness. We also have some hotter stories about discovering sexuality, exploring eroticism,
So make sure to bring the kids. I mean, that's how I've raised my kids.
It is a question that comes up. There's going to be a wide smattering, so choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
But perhaps it's more important to look at the why it's important to have stories like this presented in general space as opposed to just queer space, so that more people understand that sexuality is everywhere and it's all kind of one giant messy ball. Talk about the importance of presenting stories about sexuality in kind of plain, practical ways instead of when it gets so sensationalized.
I think there is particularly something about the way that queerness has been sexualized in mainstream culture. And we really wanted to create a space where it could feel safe to share stories about sexuality and sexual expression that weren't going to be fetishized, it wasn't going to be sensationalized, that it's really about kind of hearing the empowerment of the story and people's relationship to their own sexuality. And something that kind of I found was my experience when I both read the stories and went to our rehearsal night is hearing how much there is kind of a resonance in hearing someone's story and saying, oh my gosh, I felt that way, right? I've experienced that too. And it can be really powerful, especially when it comes to sex, because it's something that's not often talked about, or like you said, it is kind of sensationalized in this way, to really normalize that, okay, I don't have to maybe feel this shame, or I don't have to feel this sense of kind of I have to keep this to myself. But when you hear someone on stage performing their story and sharing this, it's oh, okay, I can connect with my people. I can connect with this in myself.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's the age-old adage of the shortest distance between two people is a story. And I think in this moment more than ever, we need to reclaim that distance to reclaim our humanity, especially as intersectional queer community. And there's something about this happening in this moment that feels deeply resonant around that reclamation.
We're speaking with Wilder Ayers and Reen Smith, are two of the organizers of the Queer Story Slam that is coming back to Bombyx this Saturday night, February 15th. It's called Love, Libido, and Liberation. Some storytelling events, like the CISA storytelling event, Field Notes, that I was just at last weekend, which was wonderful, just stories, non-competitive. Valley Voices, our NEPM storytelling event, competitive. Is this one of the competitive storytelling events where people are going to vote, or is this just a storytelling event?
This is just a storytelling event. And I think something...
Those are my favorite because I hate competition for things like this.
There's no competition here. I think something that we have been in sort of deep conversation about as an organizing team is how do we reimagine form? How do we create a more expansive perspective of what is a story, and that we can tell stories in so many different ways? And so it's really just a traditional and sort of non-traditional web of storytelling and community, and zero competition.
I think that can be important, because if the notion of this is in this particular time to build each other up, if you're trying to to win, it sends a very different message.
And the other part of that is we're really inviting the audience to participate. We really don't want a more traditional transactional, sort of passive audience and then performer experience. I mean, from the onset of the event, I always invite my audience to turn to somebody and connect with somebody that you have never talked to before, introduce yourself, share something about yourself. We're trying to build community, break down the fourth wall, and really unite each other across the web of our lived experiences. So as the MC, I'll be encouraging the audiences to verbally express excitement, affirmation, celebration. Let's really lift each other up verbally, and it's not, again, a very proper event. It's woo, yeah. Ooh, sorry, that was really loud. Oh my God, I'm so loud.
That's why I put the headphones on.
Yeah, I feel you. Let's all be expressive together in community in this time. Let's not shrink back. Let's celebrate loudly, boldly, and with each other.
I know we've touched on it, but we always touch on it because, the very nature of our show, and I keep bringing this up, is, like you said, stories really do connect us. But, what are some of the ways that stories that you've heard from these things have connected you to the queer community here?
I mean, thinking back to the first slam, I think it's really special that we were able to bring multi-general cross-section of community together, because I think that the local lineage and history of how we are able to enjoy the community that we get to enjoy today, sometimes those stories kind of get lost in the cracks. So we had a wonderful local gay gentleman in his 70s talk about the experience of purchasing an inn in rural New Hampshire with his partner at the time, and the experience of the discrimination and hatred and threats that they went through in the initial stages of creating this like kind of gay destination in a rural town, and then ultimately the journey of transformation as the community ended up kind of coming around to it and realizing that this was just a really wonderful hub and economic driver and place for the community to gather, and getting to witness his journey of just really, really hard experiences that he was met with as a result of being very public with his identity and being, really active as an organizer on the front lines, for me, just created a sense of like awe and gratitude and recognition for just like the historical timeline and journey that we've like all been on, and that we're like kind of continuing to build on the backs of older generations who have held a vision for an interconnected, interdependent queer community prior to, me being alive. And I really appreciate that. And I think that in this world, we are so divided by age, by identity, by profession, and any moment where we can come together across all of those intersections, I think we end up being able to weave a more like intersectional and interdependent like vision for what we're moving towards in like the world that we believe is possible. And we need everyone's stories to be represented in that vision.
I also want to say that one thing that was really special about the last time that we did this is how many people came out and said, I've been looking for a writing group. I've been looking for other creatives. I've been looking for a space where I can share my writing. And we have a whole kind of span of people. Some people are published and some people have never shared their stories out loud before or never kind of performed before. And I think that it's just been a really cool experience to create a kind of space where people can come together and share. But also one thing that we really encouraged is connecting with each other. And this Story Slam was formed out of a writing group that we've been in for over 2 years now, I want to say.
Yeah, like a year and a half.
Yeah. So, it was just kind of inspired by hearing each other's writing. And then we saw how that kind of translated to people who shared their stories saying, we want more of this. We want to build this kind of artistic community.
That's Reen Smith, who, along with Wilder Ayers in the studio with us, are talking about the Queer Story Slam, its second incarnation, Love, Libido, and Liberation, this Saturday night, February 15th at Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity in Florence. We've heard from the current administration declarations about things having to do with queerness, while at the same time declarations about bodies of water being renamed, which I read on social media yesterday. It was assigned to Gulf of Mexico at birth. So the federal administration may have a particular perspective on this type of storytelling.
We'll be here all week, all the week.
I didn't come up with that joke. However, this is being supported by both the Mass Cultural Council and the Northampton Center for the Arts. So while the federal government may not be so keen on this sort of thing, it seems like both the city and state government are still keen on this sort of thing. How important is that support financially to make these storytelling events continue to happen?
We would not be here without the deep investment of our community partners. And I mean, it goes without saying that the impact of both our local cultural council, spearheaded by the unmatched vision of the Mass Cultural Council, is just an incredible force of a vision of a more equitable society, of uplifting historically marginalized voices. And without these resources invested in, something like the Queer Story Slam, like we would still continue to try to exist, but it would certainly be a lot more challenging. And I feel like deeply heartened in this moment in time to be living in a community that really invests in community. I think in this moment in time where trans folks are being erased from the federal government specifically, I just want to name, I feel like a deep sense of pride in the courage and brilliance and heart and vulnerability that the intersectional queer and trans community is showing in stepping up on the stage in this moment for the Queer Story Slam. And I am really honored to say that disproportionately the evening is featuring voices of trans storytellers. We are here, we have always been here, and we're really excited to uplift and celebrate that brilliance.
The beautiful thing about events like this is, as many other groups have said, like showing that the group is not a monolith, and though we're connected, like it's not one specific thing. It is a myriad of things, as you would find anywhere else in the world.
It's like a rainbow.
Yeah.
It's
All week we're here.
It's the Queer Story Slam. It returns for the second time to Bombyx in Florence, the Center for Arts and Equity there. The theme of this event is love, libido, and liberation. It's Saturday night, February 15th, and we've been joined by two of the organizers of the Queer Story Slam, Reen Smith and Wilder Ayers. Thank you both so much for coming in on a snowy day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you there.
Now to switch our focus to some of the earliest stories that we tell with new picture book, Janie Writes a Play. Its main character, author Jane Yolen, and the author of the new book, her daughter, Heidi Stempel.
They join us next. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering weekly lesson programs for kids, teens, and adults at every skill level. Registration available at skisundown.com. Winter made better. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, open 7 days and nights a week with a variety of terrain for skiers and snowboarders of all abilities. Hours at skisundown.com. Winter made better.
Get ready for it, Khalees, because these are all Jane songs that are coming up.
I knew that this one was going to be in the mix as soon as I saw what was coming.
Yeah.
I knew this would be one of them. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Janie Writes a Play is a brand new picture book written by Heidi E.Y. Stempel and illustrated by Madeline Goodnight.
It's based on a true story about the beginning of the storied career of children's book author Jane Yolen. It's an inspiring and funny look at how a writer became a writer, told by another prolific writer, Jane's own daughter, Heidi E.Y. Stempel.
This Saturday at 1 p.m. at High Five Books in Florence, there is a celebration of this new book and an 86th birthday celebration of Jane Yolen. There will be cake. Yay!
Yay! And Heidi Stempel and Jane Yolen join us in the studio now. Thanks for making it in on this snowy Thursday.
It's gross out for cars.
Yeah.
It's kind of mushy.
Yes.
It's actually nasty, but nice.
Yeah, but you're hardy New Englanders now, even though the story takes place near Central Park in New York City. Yes, coming from Hatfield to come visit us.
Absolutely.
And in Florence this Saturday, Heidi, tell us the elevator pitch, as we took the elevator up here to the second floor, of what Janie Writes a Play is about.
Well, I like to say that this is my mom's origin story because authors are superheroes.
I love it.
But what it really is my mom as a storyteller has always been. And so even beyond writing books, she always tells stories. So one of the stories that she's always told us, her children, I have two brothers, as well as all of her students and basically anybody who would listen, about her big first success as a writer, which was in the first grade. Although I have to say, upon the storytelling, sometimes the grade switches to second, but I stuck with first. And it is about when she wrote the class musical. And as she says to everybody, we were all vegetables. I was the chief carrot. And we all wound up in a salad together.
The problem is, that was my story. I knew that story. I told people that story. And who ended up writing it? Not me.
You were too busy writing too many other books. I don't think prolific is a word that it goes far enough to describe how many books you have written in your career, Jane Yolen. Approaching 450, is that what you said?
Approaching 450. We should hit almost 450 this year, which is funny because this is my Heidi. I know we sound a lot alike.
Yeah.
We should probably give our notices every time. But this is Heidi. This is my 42nd published book.
Which is a lot of books.
That's a lot of books, too.
Unless you're in my family. And then I'm the piker. I'm the new person. The funny thing is my mom has always said to anyone who has a story, an anecdote from their family, or that happened today, all of her students, she says, that's a story. That's a book. You write that story. So I always expected her to write this story. And after I finally wrote the story, I said to her, did you never write this? Like, I was always waiting for you to write this story. And she said, I didn't think it was a really good story.
The irony.
Yeah.
Well, I had known it for so long, it was not interesting to me anymore.
Right. But apart from you, who better to write your story than your daughter, who probably grew up hearing this story? Was the story of this writing? I mean, if the book is wonderful, it's wonderfully illustrated. You mentioned it talks about writing the first grade musical. It feels more like rewriting the first grade musical, where you kind of audaciously said, this musical or this play is not good. I'm going to make it good, and presented it to a teacher who gave you that opportunity.
I have to say that nonfiction is maybe a little hopeful, because telling a story about a storyteller, so my primary source is someone who tells stories for a living.
Uh-huh.
We did the best. And I made up whole pieces of it in my first draft. And the fun story of that first draft was that my mom, when it was in 2019, I wrote this. We were talking about how long it takes to get a book to be a book.
And then something happened the next year that throws a wrench in some of the release. Says I had similar issues.
Some stuff
Of course,
happened.
and the editor leaves. Or buys a bookstore or something like that.
Or in my case, your illustrator gets pregnant.
That happens all the time.
Right.
Especially with illustrators.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I actually just finally decided I was going to write this. And I wrote it, and my mom had just had surgery. And I actually printed out the manuscript and brought it and sat at the foot of her bed where she was still recovering, just because, I was reading her things. And I said, can I read you something? And she said, of course. In our family, can I read you something is an everyday occurrence, right? Mm-hmm. She says it to me all the time. And so I didn't give any preamble. I just started reading. And a couple pages in, she says, I'm little Janie. And I said, I know, this is your story.
I love that you surprised her with that, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm thinking about writing this story. What do you think? Rather, just write it and then say, here it is.
Again, we've been waiting for her to write it forever. But so while we were there and she was still recovering, we sat, with me at the foot of her bed, or at the feet of her bed. And I asked her lots of questions because I had filled in all the blanks with just story pieces. Mm. And so she was able, I said, well, I put a bookstore on the street that you pass, but that doesn't seem realistic that a bookstore is open on the way to school. What is it that you passed on the way?
And I said, the butcher.
Uh-huh.
So the butcher made it in.
Then
I said, can you tell me more about your teacher? And she said, Mrs. Giler. And I just got right in, and Mrs. Giler made it. You have said so many amazing things about Mrs. Giler. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, she was just one of the great teachers in my life. She really let the kids do kid things, but helped direct them to make them even bigger. And one of her students was Susan.
Have you?
I was gonna save this for the next segment. So hold on to that story.
Put a pin in
and
the
we'll take a quick little break, and you'll find out which important Susan that you NPR listeners know of who plays into this story of the book. Janie Writes a Play, written by the prolific author from Hatfield, Heidi E.Y. Stemple, who has written 10% of the number of books that her mom, Jane Yolen, has written. It is a book about her mom. It'll be celebrated at High Five Books in Florence this Saturday at 1.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are speaking with author Heidi E.Y. Stemple, who has a new book out called Janie Writes a Play. It is a book about her mom, Jane Yolen. It is a picture book that I mentioned again is beautifully illustrated by Madeline Goodnight. And we also teased out a Susan that appears in this book. Would you like to read for us from the page that Susan appears on, Heidi?
I would love to. This is where Mrs. Giler, my mom's teacher, first grade teacher, took my mom's play and started handing out the roles. And she said, Alan and Marcel, you were tomatoes, said Mrs. Giler. Susan H. and Susan L., you were stalks of celery.
Now, you were kind enough to have the publisher send us a copy of this book in advance, and then a few days later, we got another copy of the book that was inscribed to Susan. It was not meant for NEPM.
And then I looked at the letter that went with it, and I'm like, this is not my copy of this book.
You were meaning to send that to whom at another NPR?
Susan Stamberg. She is Susan L. Because, of course, that was when she was in first grade. And when the pictures came back and the two little Susans had blonde hair, I sent it back and said, absolutely not. We need some curls on this one. I don't even think I told you, Mom, that story yet.
Because yes, if you've never seen Susan Stamberg, which many NPR listeners haven't, even though they heard her for decades, she does very curly hair. She's considered to be one of the founding mothers of NPR, along with Nina Totenberg and Cokie Roberts.
And she was one of my best friends in elementary school.
I love it. Did you keep in touch with her over the years as your career skyrocketed and her career skyrocketed, Jane Yolen?
Yeah, we did keep a little bit in touch.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
And you're both the same age, I see, according to the Wikipedias. And that age, as you are not shy to say, is 86 years old. As that birthday will be celebrated along with this book on Saturday at High Five Books in Florence.
I always want to know how you came to your illustrator, because it's always an interesting journey. And in this particular book, there's a lot, I think that there's some really inspired pictures incorporating language into the pictures themselves. So how did you get connected with Madeline Goodnight? Was she assigned to you, or did you seek her out?
So my fabulous editor, Yolanda Scott, emailed me and said, I think we would love to approach Madeline Goodnight to ask her if she would illustrate. And I was very excited because, I fell in love with her art in Powwow Day, which is by Tracy Sorrell. Her colors are brilliant. We both knew that we wanted New York City to be a character in this book, and we thought that because it was New York City in the 1940s, we also wanted it to be really accessible to children who are reading it today. So for it to still have those old-fashioned feels, but not be overwhelmingly dated looking to them. And we thought that she would just do a perfect job for that. And it's absolutely true. She really did. And what I love is I sent a photo of my mom's apartment building back in the 40s that I found online. So when we counted the windows, we had to figure out where my mom and I had long discussions about where the windows were and the apartments were. And I sent pictures of the family. And I think what's so brilliant about Maddie's work is that her strokes are bold, and she doesn't use a lot of detail. But if you look at the photos in the book in the back and my author's note of my mom as a child, she nailed it.
Yeah, she really did.
And that's a real gift to be able to kind of capture the essence of somebody in illustration in this way, and it seems to do it really well. And I will say, the author's note with the actual pictures in the back of a very young Jane Yolen and family and that time frame are also excellent. As much as I love picture books and stories and illustrations, I also love the little historical touches too.
Same. I'm a nerd.
Well, also the story had always included the fact that there were 14 windows overlooking the park.
Right.
And I got a little nervous after having said that for years and years and years and years. But did you go back or did I go back and actually count the
windows?
I
found a photo on the internet that I sent to Madeline in order for her to do the art of it. And we counted the windows, and I think there were 16 and panicked. But
I smashed 2 of them.
And we had to decide, and I don't even remember what we decided, whether to put the 14 windows or whether to put the 16 windows, because the 2 windows on the back end were the other apartment.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see whether kids what they say about that, because it's a funny little detail.
Yeah.
And kids notice everything.
Oh, they do.
Heidi, you have 2 other books coming out this year, or is this one? This is one of 2.
This is one of 2, thankfully. I had 5 last year, and none of them got the right attention.
That's hard.
I actually have in April, on April 15th, right smack dab in the middle of Poetry Month.
I was going to say tax
season,
day. But
and my sister's birthday.
We're going to pretend that it's just Poetry Month.
Yes.
Unless they get rid of that month, too. But we're going to celebrate it anyway. I have a book which is a verse novel for the middle grade audience, and it is called The Poetry of Car Mechanics.
And it's brilliant.
Wow.
Actually.
I
It's
love it.
brilliant.
No, I'll come back. I'll send you a copy.
I
I'll
can't
come
wait
back.
to read it. And Jane Yolen, you also have how many books coming out this 2025? 700?
Well, at least.
You've brought a bunch of them here.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like you
Yeah,
might have.
what more are coming?
The fact that she can't count them tells you something.
Yeah.
But like we worked out in the meantime that there was like almost 100 books in the past like 8 years. That's an astonishing clip.
Yeah, because I remember when there was a big celebration of having created 365
Yeah.
books, and that was in when? 2016?
2016.
So almost another 100 since 2016. Take that, Stephen King. You thought he was prolific.
His stuff is longer. And not as uplifting.
That's true. You're still?
He
Yeah.
probably doesn't even know Susan Stamberg.
He doesn't, right? Give me a break.
You got to know your audience.
Right.
This is important.
What flavor is your cake that people will have on Saturday?
Probably chocolate.
There we go.
Yes.
She would actually not show up if it was not chocolate. But we're going to read this book, tell some family stories, just celebrate the birthday party.
Her brother has how many books out?
Which brother?
Oh goodness.
I have two brothers. They both have books out.
Yeah, but you're in the lead still, right?
Yeah, but-
Heidi, you got 40-something.
And two of her grandchildren. My daughter has 2 books that she co-authored with my mom, and my brother's child has one called Kiki Kicks, which is a great picture book as well.
I love it. And you have another book soon coming out with your new partner in life, Jane Yolen.
I do. Peter.
He's sitting in the background very quietly.
Nobody
but
can see. Nobody can see. It's radio.
Perhaps we'll have him on when that book publishes. The two of you. You have a wonderful story. You have an incredible family. I'm lucky that I've known you for so long. Celebrate Jane Yolen's 86th birthday and this book about Jane Yolen, written by her daughter. Janie Writes a Play at High Five Books in Florence at 1 o'clock this coming Saturday, February 15th. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
You can go for the books and stay for the cake.
Yes.
Chocolate.
On
of
the
course.
next Fabulous 413, we're encountering a slew of instruments.
10 of which you can see played in one ambitious concert as we talk with saxophonist Scott Robinson and organizer Jen Glockner about Pittsfield 10x10 Upstreet Arts Festival.
We'll also take a seat at the Triplex Cinema, who are about to launch a celebration in honor of the filmmaker David Lynch.
And Live Music Friday brings us 3 different string instruments and a rare solo show by ethnomusicologist and more Tim Erickson. You can catch him at the Parlor Room on Sunday. I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.